Will you be able to use any of your Cincinnati Bengals? Is it Kendre Miller time? And what will the Colts look like with Anthony Richardson out this week? Those are kind of just a few of the top stories we're going to talk about here with the What to Watch For episode for this week for week 3 of fantasy football. I am Matt Mormann. I'm your Average Dude host for your Average Dudes podcast. Welcome on in. Be sure to give us that follow, hit the like button, all that good stuff, and follow us on the old Twitter machine, the X machine, if you will. And we're going to go through each and every game this week and kind of give you one thing to keep an eye out on. And I missed the Thursday night game, but my story that I had written down here for it was, is this the George Kittle game? He had a very nice game with 90 yards. So, hey, I was 1 for 1 on keeping something to keep an eye on for this week. And, these aren't necessarily prediction things. These are more of topics to know and to look for with each game. So we're going to start out with the Colts at the Baltimore Ravens. And Anthony Richardson, the electric rookie quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, got knocked out early on in week 2. He is out for this game with a concussion. Gardner Minshew is in. So my story for this one is Gardner Minshew and the Colts pass catchers. What does this mean for those guys? We've seen Gardner Minshew support a lot of pass catching options in the past. Last year when he was with the Eagles, he had an opportunity to play. He played decently well. He was able to get those guys at least their numbers on the receiving end of things. And remember when he was the starter back in Jacksonville, that was when DJ Chark had his big breakout year. So will Minshew be able to sustain these pass catchers, specifically Michael Pittman? I think he will. I think that Pittman could have a very nice game. The Ravens secondary is still very banged up. I haven't seen anything on Marlon Humphrey yet, but that could be a boost for that secondary. But regardless, the Ravens secondary still is dealing with some injuries regardless. And I think Minshew can at least take advantage of that for fantasy. I think that the Ravens defense could be one to start because Minshew is a little turnover prone himself. But I think that he also tends to push the ball downfield a little bit. I think he can make some things happen in the passing game for those receivers. The Tennessee Titans at the Cleveland Browns. And for this one, does Deshaun Watson finally get back on track? Is this the game where things go well? And if this is not, this is week 3. I think for me personally, week 3 tends to be a very big week. If things happened in weeks 1 and 2 and 3, I kind of start to get to the point in week 3 where I'm like, okay, now it's serious. Now it's no longer a fluke. Now it is preconceived notions go out the window a little bit. And with Watson and his struggles in the first 2 games, look, this is a very beatable Tennessee Titans secondary. If he doesn't come through on this one, I might be done with the idea of Deshaun Watson as anything more than a streaming option at this point for this season. The Denver Broncos at the Miami Dolphins. And for this one, it's Jerry Jeudy. We saw Marvin Mims hit that deep shot last week. Can we get Jeudy more involved in this offense? He didn't do a whole lot in last week's game, and this is a defense that does not scare me in Miami. But I think, this would be a good one. You got kind of that ramp up first game for Jeudy. I wasn't expecting a whole lot of him last week. This week, I want to see what does a Jerry Jeudy healthy game look like in 2023. Next up is the New England Patriots at the New York Football Jets. And this is one where it's 2 tough matchups on each side, 2 good defenses. Or is anybody going to come through, right? Touchdowns will be scored, of course, because it's the NFL. But does anyone have that good, useful game that you would feel confident in moving forward with them in a tough matchup the next time they have a tough matchup, right? And I'm mainly looking at Breece Hall, even Ramondre Stevenson to that, and Garrett Wilson, right? Are those guys going to be useful when the going gets tough, or will their offenses just completely crumble and those guys squeak out, maybe 80-yard games and not give you a whole lot? The Buffalo Bills at the Washington Football Red Commanders this week. And my one for this is Brian Robinson. He has been outstanding through the first 2 weeks. He's got me and Tanner just talked about the other night on our kind of big picture podcast of what's changed through 2 weeks of the NFL season. And the thing, though, with Brian Robinson is the Commanders have been winning. They're 2-0. And so that lends very good, very positively for his style of running back, right? He's kind of that bigger power back. He's not the passing back, and that's Gibson still, but they haven't used Gibson at all through 2 weeks. In a game against the Buffalo Bills, where I fully expect the Buffalo Bills to kind of steamroll him here, will Brian Robinson still be able to get that workload? Because we've seen from time to time with a guy like Derrick Henry that they're so committed to giving him the ball that he hangs around even those negative game scripts. Now, we also do even see with Derrick Henry that on those negative game scripts, he can get phased out. We've seen that with several of these more power-based running backs is they're not involved in the passing game. So if the team falls behind, does he then come off the field? That's one thing to be very concerned about. If you're a Brian Robinson owner, I think you're playing him this week, but I fear that the floor is low this week. Be sure to check out Tanner's show. It came out on Friday morning of the kind of start-sit decisions. He went through his weekly rankings. See what he had to say about Brian Robinson, because I think that could be a real tough decision for some people this week. But, he's been so good for 2 weeks. I don't know how you get away from him. The Falcons at Detroit Lions. And this one is all about the David Montgomery injury and what does that mean for Jahmyr Gibbs? Is it Jahmyr Gibbs' time in Detroit? I think a lot of us are very much hoping so. I was pretty bummed out to see D-Mont get hurt because I was very high on him all spring, all summer, all fall. And it's unfortunate to see him go down, but this leads to a great opportunity for Jahmyr Gibbs. If Gibbs has a great game on this weekend for the next couple weeks while D-Mont is out, does that then mean Gibbs can just ascend? And I think Gibbs, if you can buy low somehow, and honestly, I don't even know about buy low, buy it where he was drafted value. I think I'd be willing to make a trade like that right now. Like if you were picking and you got sniped on Gibbs, whoever you took in that spot, I think I'd be happily offering up for Gibbs because I think now is Jahmyr Gibbs' chance to have that workload that people were hoping he would get going into the season. The New Orleans Saints go up to Green Bay, up to Tanner's neck of the woods to face the Packers. This is all about Kendre Miller. Is it Kendre Miller time? I think it is, and I think he has a huge workload heading his way this week. He did get a full practice yesterday, I believe I saw. And if it's his backfield against a pretty suspect Green Bay Packers defense, I definitely think Kendre Miller could be a guy that you can plug into your lineup in his first game in the NFL, and he can run wild for you. He could have a very nice game in this one because there's no one else in that backfield right now. Tony Jones had a pretty decent game. He got out of the end zone on Monday night. But other than that, he kind of looked like Tony Jones would look. Jamal Williams has the hamstring problem. Alvin Kamara, he's not back yet. I think Kendre Miller is absolutely an RB2 kind of an option. On to the next one, the Houston Texans heading to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And to me, this one's interesting from a target standpoint on both sides of things. Do the Texans continue to have this 3 wide receiver split here where last week we saw Tank Dell, Nico Collins, and Robert Woods, all 3 kind of live in that 9-10 target range. On Jacksonville, we saw Christian Kirk have an absolutely monster game in week 2. We saw Calvin Ridley have a great game in week 1. And Zay Jones hasn't really left the field much. He has outsnapped both those 2 guys. So is this a situation for both of these 2 offenses where 3 guys are really kind of splitting up that work in the passing game? And what does that mean as far as what their numbers can look like? It could mean not a lighter version of what we talked about with the San Francisco 49ers offense, where someone is going to be missing out each week, and someone could also be a monster each week, though. Next up is the Los Angeles Chargers at the Miami. Let's try this one again. It's the Los Angeles Chargers at the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota and Miami are 2 very different places. I have been in both of those places at ideal times of the year to be in both. And they are in not ideal times to be in both. Let me tell you, in February, they're 2 very different places. And it's tough when you go straight from one to the other. So, Minnesota Vikings this week, they traded for Cam Akers. I think the big question that I have about them is Cam Akers ready to play in his first week with a new team? Or is this the one chance Alexander Madison has to really have a big game? Honestly, me and Tanner talked about this in our week 2 recap. I think Alexander Madison could be a really nice, sneaky play this week. I am going to look. I have not looked yet to see how much he costs in DFS, but I think he could be a guy that I think could really get a nice play because he is going against a Los Angeles Chargers defense that doesn't really care to stop the run very much. They really hardly even try at it. And so I think this is a guy who could take advantage of a good matchup. I don't necessarily think that in the first week with a new team that Cam Akers is going to suddenly have a monster workload and cut that much into Alexander Madison. Madison, for what's worth, is worth $6,300 on FanDuel, same as A.J. Dillon, $100 more than Gus Edwards. He's kind of in that range. A couple hundred more than Javonte. He's a little bit cheaper than Tyler Algier, Raheem Mostert, Miles Sanders. So he may be my running back 2 in some lineups this week if I decide to go a hair bit cheaper at that RB2 slot. Next up is the Panthers at the Seattle Seahawks. And this is a game where I had a really hard time coming up with something to keep an eye out for. Bryce Young is going to be out this week. He is not going to play. It will be Andy Dalton at quarterback for the Panthers. But I think the big story to me on this one is on the Seattle Seahawks side of things. It's just a continuing struggle with these wide receivers. DK missed some time last week, and Tyler Lockett was able to kind of take advantage. We are now in week 3. I would like to see something more of Jackson Smith and Jigba in kind of the next 2 to 3 weeks. And maybe that can start with this weekend against a pretty nice little matchup against the Carolina Panthers. Dallas at Arizona. And this one, guys, this is the second one back-to-back here where I kind of struggled to come up with a good storyline for you. The thing I came up with, though, was just that Arizona continues to be the open goal. Take the free kicks, take the Cowboys, play all of your Cowboys that you can, all the ones that make any sense in the world to have in that lineup, and take the free points because they will be there anytime anyone plays the Arizona Cardinals this season. The Chicago Bears at the Kansas City Chiefs, right down the road here. And my storyline for this one is Justin Fields. What does he look like this weekend? He's having some public comments about the coaching staff. He's kind of walking them back a little bit, saying he wants to play a little bit more loose, a little less robotic. What does that mean? My thinking means, I think that means when plays don't look great, he's going to start taking off and running. And that's great for his fantasy value. That may not be great for DJ Moore, but I think there can be enough design plays that do go right for DJ to still be pretty good for you. But look, I think, it's no secret. I'm kind of hitting the panic button a little bit on Justin Fields. I would like to see Justin Fields run around and go a little crazy this weekend in Kansas City. The Pittsburgh Steelers at the Las Vegas Raiders. Does George Pickens have the upside to have a big game in a very juicy matchup here against the Vegas Raiders? We saw him be much more involved last week whenever Deontay Johnson was out and he got to be the number 1 receiver. He wasn't just running deep. He was doing other things. He was going across the field, across the middle more. That's really good to see for him as a wide receiver. I want to see in a cake matchup against the Vegas Raiders, I want to see the Steelers offense that we saw in the preseason. And if not, then I think at that point you start to think that things are going to change a little bit in that offense. Maybe that means a coordinator change with Matt Canada. I doubt it, but maybe that means more Jalen Warren. That'd be great too. But the thing I want to see is George Pickens just go out there and feast on this offense. On this Vegas Raiders defense. My final game, the Monday night game, the Philadelphia Eagles at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the thing that I'm most interested here, I got 2 actually. I've got 1 for each side on this one. For the Buccaneers, first kind of real test a little bit on defense. Now, the secondary is banged up in Philly, so we'll see if that kind of gives another big game for Mike Evans, another nice game for Chris Godwin. Can Baker come through again with those guys? But then on the Eagles side of things, if Kenneth Gainwell plays, which it sounds pretty questionable at the moment, but if he does play, what is that split with him and DeAndre Swift? Because I think that the Eagles running back situation is one that someone hopefully would emerge. Look, week 1, Kenneth Gainwell, great game. Number 1 waiver wire ad. Week 2, DeAndre Swift, massive game when Kenneth Gainwell is out for that one. What's it look like if both guys are playing? Is it just going to be Gainwell again? Remember, DeAndre Swift, as great as he was in week 2, he had 1 touch in week 1. And so if Gainwell is back, is Gainwell just the guy? That's kind of what I'll be looking for if Gainwell plays. If he doesn't, then maybe DeAndre Swift just runs wild again, gains a little bit more of that lead on him, and then we could see something else moving forward there in Philly. But that'll do it for me. Be sure to, like I said, follow us on the socials at Real Matt Mormann. Follow me at ADP Dudes, at Tanner Ward 7. And we will see you guys. Let's see here. I think probably the next show will be my recap on Monday morning of that Sunday slate. And we'll see you guys. Hey, best of luck in those matchups. Go check out Tanner's previous show where he did go through every single game, every single player, and kind of where he has them ranked. And I'll help you out with those start-sit decisions. We know those are always tough for you. Tweet us, too, at ADP Dudes, if you need some more information. If it's kind of a flex situation, we're like, hey, I've got this running back. Tanner ranked him running back 26. I've got this wide receiver. Tanner ranked him wide receiver 26. What do I do at flex? We'll happily help you out with those kinds of decisions. So up until then, best of luck in week 3, unless you are playing me.